Welcome to Curito Connects. I'm your host, Jenn, and I've been conversing with friends around the world about life challenges and impactful moments. Conversations on this platform look at answering the questions, how we overcome challenges and how our experiences shape who we are and the work we do today. I hope this work can inspire you on your own personal and individual journey. Let's dive right in. Hello, my guest today is Aaron Goldman, a mental and emotional performance coach based out of Ashland, Oregon, and founder of PLAYfreesport, a platform that provides training sessions, seminars, workshops, and one-on-one consultations for youth athletes, coaches, parents, and teams in order to help unlock their full potential in their performance environment. Hi, Aaron.
Hey.
So Aaron and I met through a mutual friend during the pandemic. What was that, 2 years ago almost? Because we're in 2022. Debbie Krieger. So shout out to Debbie, and have remained virtual friends till this day. Maybe one day we'll get to finally meet in person. When talking about challenges and impactful moments, Aaron picked awareness as the foundation to performance. So, Aaron, what does awareness mean to you, and why is this so fundamental in working specifically with athletes? And I think this is a great time to talk about this since the Winter Olympics is coming up, or I guess right now when we're recording, it will be coming up next week. And when we post this live, I'm going to do it during the 2-week Olympic period. So I think this would be very useful for athletes to listen to.
I chose awareness because I think it has to come first. There are a lot of skills involved in finding performance and finding mastery of skills and becoming the best version of ourselves. And before we can work on that, we have to understand who we are and where we are in a given moment. So to me, first and foremost, awareness means learning to pay attention. What's happening around me? What's happening inside me? Am I sticking to the agreements that I've made with myself? We have to take space to check in. It's something that requires us to be a little self-reflective, which is not something that is always encouraged, especially in high-performance environments. And I have to be able to get in touch a little bit with how I'm feeling and what's going on in a given moment. And in a performance setting, where do I need to direct my effort and attention? So the reason it's relevant for athletes is because there's always something that is demanding our attention in a performance environment. So I grew up playing basketball, water polo, ski racing. I kind of played everything. And basketball was the one that stuck. And there's a lot to pay attention to on a basketball court. And understanding where I am in a given moment, not just what's happening in the game around me, but also what is my experience as it's happening, is useful when deciding what to do next and then taking that action.
Okay, can we do a little storytelling where you share with us your own experience, right? In terms of, I guess, to bluntly say it, like when you were kind of going through life as an athlete at the time, and I guess you were unaware of your surroundings and your internal, and then did something happen, or in retrospect, when you look back, you're like, oh, I was not aware at the time. And how has that really helped you personally, as well as in your performance at the time?
Sure. So I fell in love with the sport of basketball when I was 5 years old. My dad had season tickets to the Boston Celtics, which is where I lived when I was a kid. It's where I was born. And we would go to games. And I remember distinctly a time walking into the old Boston Garden, and this was the 80s, so security was not what it is now, and you could basically walk in and walk around, not on the court, but near the court, during shoot around and warm ups. And so I remember walking around down there and just marveling at the size of these incredible performers. And I fell in love with the sport. I played it my entire life. And when I was myself playing competitively in my 20s, I was so driven and so sort of hell bent on competing and playing my best, but I didn't have an understanding of why I was out there. If you had asked me at the time, I probably would have given the answer that many athletes will say, which is, I want to win. I want to perform. I want to get better. But there was no underlying purpose. And so my experience as an athlete was complicated and sometimes pretty miserable because the driving force was this need to correct my mistakes, to fix the things that were wrong with my game and with myself. And my identity was so wrapped up in being a basketball player that I sort of forgot about the thing that helped me fall in love with the sport in the first place, which was the spectacle and the joy and the athleticism and the movement and the competition and the energy. And it just became about doing a job and not messing up. And it took me basically my body breaking down to the point where I couldn't play without being sore for days or without something hurting, an old injury or a new injury. And so when I was 32, I said that I was going to take 3 months off from playing basketball. And what I found almost immediately was that not only did my physical health improve, but my mental health improved. So I was less hard on myself. I was less critical of every move that I made. I wasn't anymore losing sleep over all the things that I could have done better. And so what I realized was that I had just been going through this thing that I claimed to love, but not really paying attention to what my experience was within it. And so that was sort of the first moment where the light bulb kind of came on. And it's one of the things that drove me to pursue the career that I'm in now.
So, when the light bulb turned on for you, would you say that that also affected your personal relationships, right? Like in terms of how you navigated the world around you. So it's kind of like when you were kind of calling your identity as a basketball player and an athlete and your lifestyle at that time versus when you took a break for 3 months and had more of a awareness, as you called it, right? Like an understanding of yourself better, detaching yourself from the identity of basketball. Did you see a shift in how your relationships and how you presented yourself and identity, um, in your environment, right? Like,
Yeah, it did change. And actually that 3 month break actually became retirement basically. Because I I loved waking up feeling better, waking up not sore, and getting more sleep because I wasn't ruminating over all the ways that I was a failure. Even if we had won and I had played really well, anytime after a game, it was like I could count on not sleeping. And yeah, it did change my relationships. Some sort of in the simplest way, I stopped spending time with some people because they were my basketball friends and I stopped playing. And so those relationships sort of fell away. And I realized eventually, let me back up because it didn't just happen overnight. It wasn't like I stopped playing sports and all of a sudden everything became clear. I had help. I was in therapy at the time for something sort of different, although it ended up being something related. Um, right? This larger question of identity and anxiety and um, stress and putting pressure on oneself. So I had help and I had support from my family, and I had a business that I was running. And so I was able to devote more time to these other areas of my life that were important and that fed me in different ways. And so stopping playing basketball actually coincided with the most successful year and a half stretch of that particular career that I was in at the time. And it freed up a lot of time. It freed up time to devote to my coaching. I was coaching high school water polo at the time, and it gave me time to devote to that. And it sort of changed my relationship to myself as well, which of course is the first relationship that we work on when we start to practice awareness. And so I started to sort of pay a little more attention to the people that I was surrounding myself with, the behaviors that I was engaging in, the ways that I was interacting with peers and clients and friends and family. And it was in some ways the beginning of a really important period of growing up for me in a way that I
Mm.
hadn't before.
Do you think that if you had the tools that you have now, at the time when you were, you know, an athlete, and well, I mean, you still are, but when you were really invested in your basketball career, that you would have been able to stretch that career a little bit longer?
I think that I don't know about longer because the thing that ultimately sort of transitioned me from active athlete to former athlete was physical breakdown. But if I had known how important it is to stay connected to what brings us joy in a sport, and that it's okay to make mistakes, that it's okay to not be perfect, that it's okay to be a work in progress and to embrace not just the successful moments, but also the moments that challenge us. I think my career as a player would have been much happier, and it would have
Mm.
been much more fulfilling and meaningful. And I think I also would have been a more pleasant person to play with. I know in retrospect, it sort of makes me cringe some of the interactions that I had and my part in those, and the way that my ego just was in the driver's seat the whole time. And I think it made me sort of unpleasant to be around sometimes when I was on the court. And I wish of all the things that may have been different with knowledge that I didn't have, that I have now, I think that is the thing that I would want to change the most.
Mm. So, can you also give some examples of how do you like so in your line of work now, and how do you teach or apply awareness in, your day to day, whether it be personal or, when you're working with your clients?
Well, the first question that I always ask an athlete or a group of athletes or a coach or whoever's in front of me is why? Why do you do what you do? Why this thing? So I work with athletes, and athletes are athletic. And so they have the choice of playing possibly whatever sport they want. So why is it soccer, or why is it basketball, or why is it golf, or why is it ski racing? what about it fulfills you? What about it drives you? Why do you continue to show up even when it's difficult, even when you're challenged, even when you're failing? Like, why are you out here? And what that question does is it starts bringing a little bit of awareness to the internal process that drives someone.
What are some of the answers you normally get? And I know you work with a range of ages, so so like from the younger kids to the teenagers to adults, or like professionals, I guess. What kind of answers do you normally get from them?
They're kind of all over the map. I was talking to a high school soccer player last week, and I asked that question, and she told me that it started out as something that she did so that she could be with her friends because her friends played soccer and she wanted to be with her friends. And then it became something that she fell in love with. I was talking to another athlete, also a soccer player, who said that there's just something about it that feeds her soul. And so you ask these questions and you sometimes get pretty surprising answers. You also hear more in a team setting, you hear because we want to win. And I mean, I was there. I've been there. I've been totally driven by winning, and nothing else will suffice as a way to define success. And so no matter what the answer is, it's a way in. Because if someone is like, I'm doing this because I love it and because it feeds my soul and because I love being with my friends and because I want to be great, then that steers the conversation in a particular direction. And if someone says, all I care about is winning, that's also really useful information and can steer the conversation.
Hmm. It sounds a lot like character building as well, right? Like having awareness is very much a reflection of individual's character.
Yes, sports build character. Uh, I remember when I was a kid, I used to love to read Calvin and Hobbes. And Calvin's dad was sort of this caricature of the father who thinks that everything is an opportunity to build character. So he'll send Calvin out to shovel snow and it builds character. And he'll send him out to rake leaves and it builds character. And he'll send him out to learn to ride the bicycle that's trying to kill him and it builds character. You have to read Calvin and Hobbes, you'll know what I mean. And sports do the same thing for us because we are presented with all of these opportunities and challenges that we have to overcome. And to me, building character means I'm learning about myself. And one of the things we talk about as coaches and as fans of sports is we say that someone is a character guy or they're a locker room player,
Hmm.
meaning they bring positivity or they bring support or they bring knowledge or mentorship to a locker room.
Hmm.
Well, another way of saying that is that they have character. And often the way that character is built is through struggle. But we only build character through struggle if we're paying attention and we're available to learn what is there to be learned from the things that we're going through.
Right. Very well said. I, out of curiosity, because personally, I never really played like team sports. I always did like individual sports. So like, cross country. I mean, tennis is a team sport, but I was more of a singles player. And then track and field. It is, if you did relays, yes, I know it's a team sport as well, but I do feel like sometimes when you're in a team versus like individual sports, I guess that mindset is also a little bit different. So could you kind of talk a little bit about that too? I know you apply it the same way, but I do feel like it's a little different when you're, like you're a forward or, you know, in the team versus like you're racing by yourself, right? And the achievement you're
Yeah.
getting. And so like, the pressure and the stress and the anxiety is same, but it also feels a little different, right? Because in a team setting, I think a lot of times you feel like, I'm letting the whole team down, right? If you like missed it, like that one goal, like that was, the one shot that was you, right? Versus like if it was an individual sport, it's like it's all you, but you don't have to feel bad towards like the other seven, however many team members you have on your team. So I don't know if that, I'm assuming that's also something you work with, when you talk to these different athletes as well.
Yeah. I played both individual and team sports, and I work with both. I think this notion of not wanting to let your team down is really powerful. And it shows up a lot, especially with young athletes. Some of what I try to help those athletes understand is that one play doesn't make or break an entire game or a season, right? A soccer game is long. A soccer game's 90 minutes long. A basketball game is 40 or 48 minutes long. And there are literally hundreds of things that happen in those 40 or 48 or 90 minutes or however long it is. And no one person has that much power to make or break. Even the great stars in team sports need the team around them in order to be successful. So, one of the things with being on a team that can be a challenge, but has the potential to be something really powerfully good is the fact that we're not out there alone. So, part of the work that I do with teams is building trust, building awareness of the people around you, building connection. With individual sports, it can be very lonely. You said you played tennis. Tennis is a really unique sport because you're out there, and if you're playing on a big stage, the Australian Open is happening right now. And you're out there, and it's you and the other person, and everyone is watching. And sometimes it's totally silent. Tennis is very quiet for some reason. Even the Australian Open, which is known as being sort of the rowdy major or the rowdy Grand Slam tournament, it's very quiet. And you can hear everything that happens even through the TV. And so imagine being that athlete and you're out there and it's silent and you're just there and it's you and this other person. And some people have the mindset where they like that because it can be very calming. And other people need a little more stimulation. And so knowing that about yourself as an athlete can be really important in how you approach the thing that you're doing. Because if you're a person who needs more stimulation but loves tennis, then there's a study to be made there about how you still find success and motivation in an environment that isn't necessarily natural for you.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why awareness, in my estimation, is the foundation of beginning the process of figuring out how each individual, so how do I, for me, given what I'm knowing about myself and what I'm learning about myself, find my way to being the best version of myself, to finding success, however I choose to define it.
Right. And how do you do that for yourself these days?
For me,
Yeah.
I meditate. So I have a mindfulness practice that I'm working on making more consistent. I try to meditate for somewhere between 10 and 30 minutes every morning, and then a couple of minutes just to sort of wind down before I go to bed. I journal occasionally. I read books that I think will stimulate sort of my own thought process. One of the things about the graduate program that I went to, shout out to Boston University School of Education, was that we were filtering everything through our own experience. So everyone in the program was an athlete, and there were recreational athletes, people who had played college, people who had played some professional sports. And the encouragement was to filter everything that we were learning through our own experience, through journaling and writing papers. And so one of the things that I learned painfully sometimes was to see how what I'm taking in affects me and to think critically about it. And so I like to read because it gives me a chance to sort of refresh my perspective and learn new things. And then I can apply it in my work and apply it to myself. The other thing is I exercise. The thing about awareness is we can practice it anytime. We can practice it when we're sitting. We can practice it when we're walking. We can practice it when we're working out. We can practice it right now having this conversation. And so it's a skill that is really, really universal. Sport is a great focused environment to learn the skills that we can apply anywhere. And so I think mostly what I'm trying to do is be available for those moments that give me an opportunity to pay attention, and also the moments that remind me to pay attention when I'm not.
I think you just kind of segued into my next question when you said that sport is a great segue to any environment. And I think earlier on when I first learned about what you did, I think I even asked you. I said, "Oh, this is really interesting because then can you apply it to like professional musicians or artists or obviously top executives and companies, right? Which are not the categories of individuals you work with right now, but the concept is the same, right? In terms of how you would work with them, right? Because professional musicians, for instance, also have to deal with stress and performing, and it's lonely. They have to practice, 7 days a week for hours on end with their musical instrument, right? And then they have to be careful if they're a violinist or a pianist, their fingers are their assets, right? So in a way, it's the same, right? I wanted to ask if you could kind of, if anyone who's listening to this episode who might not be an athlete, but also a professional in their own right, which is basically everyone who's an adult and working, and how again does awareness apply to them, right? Like in that relatable sense.
Well, performance is performance. And whether I'm an athlete or a musician or an actor or a CEO or someone who's just trying to do my job, or I'm doing something recreationally, performing is performing. And the higher we go in terms of the stakes of what we're doing, the more pressure there is to perform. And all of those things that you just named are ways for us to learn these skills. Sport just happens to be my background and the thing that I fell in love with. But there are people in my field who work with musicians and work with actors and work with business people. My graduate school mentor works with CEOs and works with management teams, and the skills fundamentally are the same, which is why it's so important to learn them, because no one is just one thing. To get back to this identity piece, I thought that I was a basketball player, but I wasn't a basketball player. I was a person who played basketball. And just changing the way that we talk about things and the way that we frame things can be a really useful application of awareness. And so if I'm trying to learn a skill, it's helpful to view myself as someone who has the versatility to be able to learn it. So I played basketball, but I also played water polo. I also love to ski. I also love to read. That doesn't mean that I'm a skier or a reader or a basketball player. It just means that I'm a person. And those happen to be my interests. And so, for the people out there who are really dedicated and really committed to the thing that you're doing, it's really beautiful and it's really powerful to have something pulling you forward and something that gets you out of bed and something that drives you. And it's also really important to understand that it's something that we do and something that we love, but it's not who we are. No one is defined by one thing that they do.
Right. Actually, this again, you're segueing to my next question, which is,
It's
um,
because I read your questions.
I no, I'm just on record. I'm actually not going down my questions, and I normally don't prepare questions, as most people who are listening knows this. Um, my question I wanted to ask is, you were saying high performance and awareness to be able to recognize, why they're doing it and how to excel, right? But for instance, in your example, for you personally, your body was broken and therefore you were not able to perform, and therefore it allowed you to have this like aha moment where the light bulb switch. For a lot of us too, right? Like, careers end, and there's always going to be some sort of timeline, but we don't know when, right? And athletes retire and this and that. So, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but like, there is a level of ego that plays into it, right? And letting go. Like once you hit that point of like, I have to make a decision. Do I continue to play? It doesn't make sense for me to play. Does it make sense for me to continue to stay in this executive role? And I think a lot of people who hit that, when they cross that bridge, it's kind of like they have to make that decision, and it's almost like a new identity shift, which is kind of what you were saying earlier, right? You're not just that executive, you're not just that athlete, you're not just this X, Y, and Z. So for those who, again, are maybe not as aware, during this whole decade or 2 decade that they've devoted their entire life to this one identity they hold, I guess that's why people go to quote unquote therapy, right? Like that's right, when they kind of get stuck. So again, how does awareness, if for those who are in these situations, how can they be more mindful about it, right? So that when they do hit those points, they can not spiral, right? Does this make sense? Does my question make sense? I think
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
asking.
it does. It's a couple of questions rolled into one. But to answer the first part, we don't have to do it alone. And I think one of the things about sort of high-powered people, right? Those of us who are very driven and can get very single-minded, there's an assumption, both because we feel like we have to do it for some fulfillment, but also because our ego is telling us that we're the only person who can make it happen the way that we want it to happen. So there's this tendency to feel like we're alone, like we have to do it all ourselves. And I'm saying this because I am one of those people, and it's something that I'm working on. So getting help is, first of all, a really courageous act. Doesn't have to be professional help. We don't have to have a therapist, although it can be helpful. But reaching out and just talking to somebody about the stress that you're under, or how you feel like you're all alone in doing this thing, or even about how passionate you are about it. Connection is really important. We are social animals, first and foremost, and we need each other. And so that's that's sort of the first piece of advice that I can give is reach out. The second one is that as we, especially if we're sort of deeper into a career, it's really important to have other interests. So I was really lucky because even though I was really hyper focused on my sport, I also was coaching at the time, and I also was running a business and studying sports rehab, and I had friends, and I have my family. And so I had these things to sort of soften the blow. I also had the reality of my body breaking down. And sometimes it takes a painful event or a painful realization to sort of snap us out of our single mindedness. And so for me, I call that the 2x4 method. Some of us get a gentle push and it's enough. And some of us need a 2x4 upside the head. And I'm definitely in that second group. And so I've had a few. And one of the things I think that was behind those moments was a need for me to start paying more attention. And if we can pay attention and look inside of ourselves a little bit and self reflect, which is something that, especially in Western cultures, we are not encouraged to do. But if we can, there's an opportunity to start discovering other aspects of ourselves. And then we have to find the courage to follow those little breadcrumbs. And so, you know, if you're a CEO and you've been at you're at a business that you built and you've been there for 25 years and all of a sudden it doesn't feel the same way, maybe you owe it to yourself to reflect a little bit. How have things changed? How have you changed? How have your values changed? How has the world changed? And is what you're doing still the thing that is feeding that part of you that gets satisfaction and joy and fulfillment from whatever it is that you're doing? And if the answer is no, then you have some information to work with. The point for me of awareness is making intentional choice. It's not just having information. Information is just information. But the next step is to give ourselves space to reflect on what we might do with that information. Maybe there's nothing to do in that moment. Maybe the moment for doing something hasn't arrived yet. But maybe there is something that we can do. Maybe there's a place that we can direct our attention that's not where we're directing it now. Or there's an action that we need to take that's going to help us move in the direction that we're trying to go to. You know, coming back to sports, although it works in any venue, we have these goals that we set to pull us forward. But if we're not aware of what's happening in the present moment, if we're so focused on the goal that's down the road, far away in the unknown future, or we're focused on what we've done in the past, whether good or bad, we run the risk of losing awareness of the present moment, which is the only place where we can actually act if there's an action to be taken. And sometimes that action is to rest. Sometimes it's to take care of ourselves. Sometimes it's to take a break or a nap or hang out with a friend or take a shower or do something silly or simple to reset. And sometimes if you're in the heat of the moment, having practiced awareness before makes it quicker for us to make those choices because it becomes part of what we do. So it's not enough to say, well, when I get in the game, I'm going to pay attention. When I get in that meeting, I'm going to pay attention. When I get up on that stage in front of those fans with my violin, I'm going to pay attention. We have to make it part of what we do. Otherwise, we can't leverage that skill when we need it.
Mm. I thought it was very interesting you said Western culture because I was thinking in my head, I was like, well, over here, I think it's the same thing. I think just society as a whole, we're less aware these days because of technology. But that's a whole other conversation.
But
uh,
that's actually it's an answer to one of the questions that you sent me. Um, yeah, I think the world is very distracting, and
yeah.
it's based on convenience. A lot of the technology that's coming out now is based on making our lives easier and more convenient, and uh, having things available quicker, information and products, and everything's very commercialized, and it can be very easy to lose touch with what is meaningful when we are bombarded with images and expectations and ideology all the time. And I think one of the great things about having something that is really meaningful, like a sport or a musical instrument or work that you love, is that it provides an opportunity to slow down and reflect a little bit. And then maybe there's some action to be taken to help us stay more connected and stay more grounded and stay more aware and more discerning as we go through our lives in this increasingly technological world that we live in.
But we have to thank technology, otherwise we wouldn't be recording this podcast.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Technology is supremely useful. The last couple of years, I wouldn't have been able to work without technology. The point isn't to make a grandiose black and white decision about what's good and bad. The point is to practice awareness so that we can be discerning and maybe appreciate a little bit of the nuance of the things that we're doing. Nothing is inherently good or bad. Technology isn't inherently good or bad. A sport isn't inherently good. It's what we make of it based on our awareness and how we choose to engage.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, we're running short on time actually. I think there's definitely other things we could record in the future, different topics, different conversations. But to wrap up before we close off, what books? Okay, I like asking. Well, I mean, you can either do books or you can do your advice. Those are usually the two that I ask, obviously. Books that you would recommend to those who are listening who want to be more aware or for athletes to, improve their performance in their sport.
I'm going to answer both because
Okay.
you know me. I don't want to choose. Um, the first book that I would recommend is called The Mindful Athlete by George Mumford. George Mumford is a mentor of mine. He was a mindfulness and meditation teacher for Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant. He works with the New York Knicks right now. And his book is sort of a roadmap to becoming more mindfully engaged in our day-to-day process. It's called The Mindful Athlete, but anybody can read it. There's just wisdom in that book. Um, Another one, I mean, for sports people out there, there's a book called The Boys in the Boat, which is about the 1936 University of Washington rowing team that went to the Olympics in Germany as the Nazis were rising to power right before the start of World War II. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful story. And you learn, or I learned a lot about what drives athletes to do what they're doing. And it's a gorgeous story, and it's really beautifully written. All true. So those are 2 books. If anybody wants more books to read, you can point them in my direction. The other question about advice, I think, in the spirit of the Olympics starting, for all of us as spectators, so there aren't going to be any live fans, or there'll be very few at this Olympics. And so one of the things that makes the Olympic season so special is the pageantry and the celebration. And I understand it's very politically fraught and it's complicated, and there's another discussion to be had about, are things happening in the Olympic spirit? There's a lot of corruption, and right, there's all this stuff that we know about if we're paying attention to the news. And for the athletes, it's potentially a once in a lifetime opportunity to go compete and put all of the work that they have done into this singular moment. And we as fans watch these events, and we get very patriotic, and we get disappointed when the athletes representing our country don't win. But just to get there is a lifetime achievement. And so, in the spirit of awareness, I would encourage people who are about to watch the Olympics, or by the time this comes out, who are watching the Olympics, to be mindful of what we don't see when we're watching someone perform. We're not seeing all of the hours they put in. We're not seeing the struggles and the mental health things that they're dealing with, and the countless rehabilitations from endless injuries, and the work day and night that they put into getting to that stage and putting themselves in a position to have an opportunity to do something that almost no one ever gets to do. So just be mindful and be grateful that they are doing that, and that we're able to watch and appreciate and honor them for all that they are doing to get to where they are.
Awesome. Well said. I will put your links in the resources, including the books that you recommended, so people can look you up. Do you work with people outside of the US? Like, should I,
I absolutely do. One of the beauties of technology is that all I have to do is be willing to get up really early or stay up late, and I can work with anybody anywhere. The best way to get a hold of me is through my website, which is PLAYfreesport.com. I am on social media, but I don't engage with it very much. But I'll check it every once in a while. So you can find me PLAYfreesport on Instagram. And yes, I work with people who play sports from all over the world.
Great. We'll leave it there. Thanks for your time.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate the opportunity, and I look forward to that in-person meeting someday down the road.
Likewise.
That's all we have time for today. Thank you for listening to Curito Connects. For more Connects content, collaborations, and discoveries set to inspire you on your own individual journey, please head to our website at www.curito.co. Until next time, stay inspired, and thank you for joining us at Curito Connects.